I was tromping in the bushes behind your house the other day. Nice little path there across the water.
Yeah, up in Redford Heights, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's a nice little path across the water heading towards the log train trail from your house.
Yeah, there is. Yep.
So you obviously have some engineers in your neighborhood, other than in addition to the beavers.
I think there might be some thieves too. They stole that bridge somewhere. I don't know. Maybe the city donated it.
Whether they know or not, I don't know.
Whether they know or not, right?
Yeah.
Such a great hiking spot.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. Andrew, nice to see you.
Nice to see everyone.
Nice to see you.
So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have enough of a quorum. We could get started. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's get started. And there's Ron Paulson. Ron, nice to see you.
Hello, fellas.
These, city councilors got to be last ones on.
Well, I had trouble getting onto my internet here at home and was starting to panic, but we're all under control.
And Shelley, before I forget, congratulations on becoming chair of the board of the Port Authority.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so was that an example of Port Alberni Railway? Well, I mean, we need some activity on that railway because not much else is happening, so might as well do that.
Right.
And I see Ken Watts there, and I think we almost saw Natasha Marshall. So welcome, Natasha. Natasha, everybody is going to be the representative for the Sechot, and in just a minute, I'm going to get Ken to actually introduce her to everybody. So I'd like to call our meeting to order and recognize that we're doing our business today on the traditional territory of the unceded territory of the Hupetchisitt and Sechot First Nations. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed, and it is possible that we will get some questions sent to Janice throughout the meeting. And I'll check at the end of the meeting just to see if there are any. So at this point, Natasha, I'm really pleased to meet you virtually. Natasha is as I said, is replacing Ken, who's of course has many of his own responsibilities now that he's chief of the Sechot First Nation. So Ken, I'll turn this over to you and give you the opportunity to introduce Natasha Marshall.
Awesome, thank you. So once again, Wami, elected chief counselor for Sechot. Sorry I couldn't spend more time with you guys. It was great the last session, but we've developed portfolios now amongst Sechot, and Natasha will be helping leading economic development for Sechot. Natasha has an extensive background in business development with First Nations. So I'm really excited, and so should everybody else about Sechot's potential having Natasha on board here. She's going to bring a lot of insight and Sechot values to this advisory group. And yeah, I won't take up too more time. I just wanted to introduce everybody to her and say how excited I am to have her on board here and supporting the team and the input she'll be able to provide the advisory committee here. And just to close, and I'll let her introduce herself. And just to close is that, Sechot's committed to working with everybody here at this table. I'm really excited about the potential for the airport and Sechot having a role and a presence there in the future. And through this working group and this advisory, I think we're going to do great things. So with that, here's Natasha, one of our council members, and now will be the rep for Sechot here. So,
Thanks, Ken.
Uklama Kokwea, Tishat Aksu. My name is Natasha Marshall. I'm from Tishat First Nations. I just recently became council, and I'm looking forward to everyone's input in our community. And yeah, thanks for the warm welcome, everybody.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you. Welcome.
Good to meet you too.
So let's just have other people go around and introduce themselves. And I know we'll be coming into this meeting, but let's start with Mark Duncan.
Mark Duncan, yes, and Andrew and I have been working diligently on this. And I come from quite a long airport background, and I've got the help with Andrew. You can do your intro when we get to that.
Okay, and just because I'm going to follow my screen from left to right, Douglas Holmes.
Hi, good afternoon. Douglas Holmes. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. Jenny Brunn will be joining us at some point as well. She's the General Manager for Community Services, who would normally be attending, but we had an absence there. She's new to the position, and so she's just getting up to speed on a number of different files. And so we'll both be happy to connect with this committee in this important piece of work that's going on right now. And welcome, Natasha.
Okay, and Penny Cote.
Welcome. My name's Penny Cote, Aklama Penny Cote. Welcome to our new member, Natasha Marshall. I'm the Regional District Director appointed to this committee, Electoral Area Director for Sprout Lake. So may have meetings in the future and other things. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bob Kangeser.
Good afternoon, Bob Kangeser, a member at large of the Alberni Valley, happily retired. At one time, I was Secretary Treasurer for School District, had been in the Air Force for a number of years a while ago, long time ago. So I've always had an interest in aviation. And I've had an interest in the Port Authority, being a director and chair there for a number of years as well.
And Mike Cooper.
Hi, it's Mike Cooper here, and I was 26 years with McMillan Bodell in the Alberni Valley and over on the other side of the island, and 14 years at the Nanaimo Airport, and look forward to working through this program with you folk, and welcome, Natasha.
And Pat Deacon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Pat Deacon, City of Port Alberni Economic Development and resource person to the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Committee. And I see that Brandy Lauder has joined us as well. So welcome to our Indigenous community, both Sishot and Hupacheset. And thank you.
And Shelley Crest.
Sure, no worries. Nice to meet you, Natasha. Nice to see you, Ken. I am, of course, newly elected chair of the Port Authority, and I'm looking forward to working more closely with your nation and continuing also to work with Hupacheset Nation. And welcome to the committee.
Thank you. And Andrew Cuthbert.
Hi, I'm Andrew Cuthbert. I work with urban systems and been working with Mark Duncan on the strategic plan for the airport. And so my background's in land use planning, and I've been helping out Mark with that and the committee.
Thank you. And Ron Paulson.
Hi, welcome, Natasha. It's great to have you on board. Ken, life is so fleeting. You're gone already. We're going to miss you. But Natasha, welcome to the committee. And my background, I guess, previous to being on city council, was 10 years with Parks and Recreation at the multiplex. And I'm one of those kids that jumped off the roof hoping to be able to fly, but I have not been able to fly. So maybe the airport committee can give me some hints. So anyway, welcome aboard, Ken. We're going to miss you.
Okay, and Mark Fortune.
Mark Fortune with the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, Airport Manager for both the Tofino site and Port Alberni. Welcome.
Thank you. And Dan Savard.
Hey guys, I'm Daniel Savard. I love seeing all that sunshine in everybody's faces today. It looks awesome. I'm representing the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also representing the tourism business with my Swept Away Inn, which is a bed and breakfast and a French Moroccan restaurant on our tugboat. There we go.
Thanks, Dan. And Brandy Lauder.
Sorry, have to unmute. Brandy Lauder, elected councillor for the Hoopatchisipt First Nation.
And
Hello.
even though she's in the background, Janice Hill, who you have been in touch with. Janice, would you like to just introduce yourself, please?
Sorry. Hi, I'm Janice. So I'm in the background and I'm the one who sends out the agendas and will take the minutes, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. And once again, Natasha, welcome. Next item before we turn this over to Mark and Andrew is approval of our agenda. So we need a motion to approve, including any late items. Somebody like to make that motion? Okay, Shelley, thank you. And is there a seconder for the motion? And Penny, thank you. Anybody opposed? In that case, I declare the motion carried. And committee, we have our minutes from the meeting, our last meeting on February the 2nd, which was actually, was it February the 2nd or February the 3rd?
Second.
No, February the 2nd.
I'll move a receipt.
Okay, thank you. And a seconder? So a seconder? Okay, Bob, thank you very much. Anybody opposed? In which case I declare that the minutes are adopted. That the minutes should be received, sorry. There are no petitions or delegations. And in that case, we turn our meeting over to our fearless leader, Mark Duncan.
Yes, I'm quite fearful actually, but we'll try to get through this. Mike, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Mike, as we discussed last time, what we'd like to do is promote discussion with the committee. So we have a presentation which you've probably seen the slides for, and our idea would be to we've sort of divided into 4 sections, so we can stop after each section and open it up to questions, comments, etc. Our objective obviously is to get the committee, we really hope, leads the we really want to facilitate this as opposed to try to tell you which way to go. I mean, it has to be owned by you and the Alberni Valley. So I'm going to ask Andrew to put up we're going to do about 4 slides. We're going to start with taking a look at a few airports, and then opening it up to discussing. We'll kind of do an airports overview. And in our presentation, we're going to cover also you do a SWOT on the airport. We're going to take a look at some airport successes and failures, take a look at some alternatives for you, and then also discuss some strategies that have started to emerge from our survey that we did, as well as interviews with the tenants. So next slide. Yeah, might as well go right to the next airport. So we chose 3 airports to just take a closer look at, And we actually had the advantage on Nanaimo Airport. If you have any questions, Mike Hooper is very familiar with this airport, but we'll just give you some overview of the airport. So the airport's run by an airport commission. The airport commission is structured under the Canada Corporations Act. The airport sits in 2 districts. It has 3 air carriers. Under Mike's reign, it actually experienced very rapid growth. And we can discuss that later, but one of the reasons is the runway was extended to 6,600 feet, and it allowed larger carriers to land at the airport. It's situated in a good catchment area, which we'll talk about, over 100,000, and recently had an airport expansion. We'll talk about, this is just to give you an overview of that airport. It also has what we call obstacle limitation surface challenges. It has a hill. I know that there was a lot of trees cleared, and that's always a challenge for airports. You know, the acronym is OLS. You'll hear that quite often if you're in the airport management world. Next airport is Vanderhoof. I chose that. It's up north. It's a general aviation airport. I chose that because it's got a runway length close to yours of 5,000 feet. It's only 75 feet wide. It's run by the district of Vanderhoof. It's about 6 kilometers outside of Vanderhoof. Interestingly, it's an hour and 15 minutes from Prince George, where it's the nearest scheduled traffic. It basically has hangars. It has a maintenance facility. It has a clubhouse as opposed to a terminal. And it has, I believe, 2 flight schools now, but it has at least 1 flight school. One of the interesting things about this airport, it has the Vanderhoof Air Show Society. And each 2 years, they put on an air show at that airport, which actually has given the airport international recognition because people fly in performers from the States, and they've even had the snowbirds there. Next airport. I chose Salmon Arm because from a situational standpoint, Salmon Arm is quite similar to Alberni Valley. It's situated about an hour and 20 or an hour and a half. I'm sure you're all familiar with Salmon Arm, but it's an hour and a half from Kelowna and also an hour and 20 from Kamloops. It's run by the city of Salmon Arm. It's about 4 kilometers outside the city, adjacent to a golf course. You'll actually find golf courses, quite a few golf courses close to airports, as actually Nanaimo has a golf course. They call it Shuswap Regional Airport. They've attempted to get scheduled traffic into Salmon Arm quite often, but the frequency and the distance to either Kamloops or Kelowna makes it difficult. It's a difficult sell at the airport. They have very active airport appreciation days, which brings the airport close to the city. They also have OLS restrictions, and they need hazard lights in order to operate at night. Next slide. So here's a summary matrix of a group of airports, just to give you some main parameters around airport operations. So there's Nanaimo, 6,600 feet, operated by a commission. It has a terminal building, it's got lights. And I used an item called commute. And in terms of commute, that basically means how long does it take to get from the major city to scheduled traffic, or in the case of, say, Vanderhoof, how far do you have to go to get to an airport with scheduled traffic? So Nanaimo's located 50 minutes out of the city center. Vanderhoof is an hour and 15 from Prince George. Salmon Arm, you can see it's a little bit, the 4,600 foot runway, it's a little bit shorter. Vernon's another interesting one. They have a catchment area of about 40,000, but they're only 30 minutes from Kelowna. Kamloops, interesting there. They have an 8,000 foot runway. It's run by the Vantage Group, which is a subsidiary of YVR, on lease from the city of Kamloops. Kelowna is operated by the city. They have an 8,900 foot runway. Boundary Bay, it's another general aviation airport. It's operated by a private aviation company under lease from Delta. And then Alberni Valley with 5,003 feet run by the district. And you're about an hour and 15 from Nanaimo or Comox. So just putting this into a little bit of a summary. Next slide. And then we'll open it up to some discussion. One of the, I mean, we could study 100 airports, but you know, one of the things we need to sort of talk about, airports are obviously influenced by the surrounding population. We call it the catchment area, the location. Just as an example, in Nova Scotia, there are only 2 airports that have scheduled traffic, and the population of Nova Scotia is about 1 million. There used to be scheduled traffic to Yarmouth, for example, which is in the south of Nova Scotia, and it's about 3.5 hours from Halifax International. Vancouver Island, interestingly, has 6 airports with scheduled traffic. And the population of Vancouver Island is about, I think, 750,000. Another item, every airport is unique. In the business, they say, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. So every airport needs to work on its own attributes and use its own benefits and surrounding community. OLS constraints are common. I know that if you talk to Mark Fortune, that's one of the issues he deals with almost on a daily basis with Tofino and actually with Alberni Valley. BC naturally has more airports because of water. Island airports obviously have more airports than on-land airports. Having a good airport plan obviously influences outcomes, and ownership in all aspects of an airport is very important. It's very important to get the community involved in making the airport work. So that's sort of section 1. It's just meant to be an overview. And maybe now we can take down that slide and Mike, open it up to any comments or questions.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I know you can't pick every airport in the world, Mark, or in the region, but I'm wondering if looking at places like Port McNeill or Campbell River or Powell River would have lent some information to us. For example, Campbell River is fairly close by, has scheduled service, or at least it did have. Powell River also has scheduled service, and it's a bit isolated from the rest of the world almost. And Port McNeill is the one where we get bombarded from the drag racers saying, oh, why can't we run our airport the same way Port McNeill does? So any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, Port McNeill is, I think, about 50 feet wide in terms of the actual runway. And I actually have a friend that flies out of Port McNeill. He flies the West Coast helicopters. Port McNeill, they have the you know, the ability to. There's no lighting. You know, they can shut it down without impacting anybody. So and you know, I haven't heard about the drag race concept. Campbell River, you're absolutely right. It has scheduled service. Interestingly, Campbell River used to be owned by Transport Canada a long time ago, until a deal was struck with the armed forces to use Comox. And obviously with the longer runway in Comox, they were able to attract business. So it's an interesting war between Comox and Campbell River. Campbell River actually moved more into a fishing charter type of service. And Powell River, yes, served by Pacific Coastal, and actually, interestingly, Pacific Coastal sort of started in Powell River, right? And you're absolutely right. We could look at those three airports. They all have individual characteristics, and probably all have ideas that could be used at Alberni Valley.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, Ron, go ahead. Just make sure you're.
Mark, for our group and for the uninitiated, could you just kind of review again? We've just had an expansion to our airport runway, 5,000 feet. Maybe you could make some comment on what we can and can't do with that particular facility at 5,000 feet. I noticed on your chart that a couple of the airports were 8,000 feet and there was as little as 3,000 feet. So just kind of where we fit in at the 5,000 foot mark on what we can and what we can't do.
Yeah, no, we'll get that into that a little bit further in the next section of the presentation. But just quickly to summarize that, you know, there's 500 airports in Canada, and that's when you start going from the, you know, the grass fields to Toronto International. There's about 2,000 if you start adding in heliports and you know, water aerodromes. But 3,000 feet is you know, they go down to about 1,500 feet for very small grass strips, but 3,000 feet would be a good general aviation airport where you can fly 172s, etc., and flying training type airport. You need 5,000 feet to land a 737, etc., safely. But if you go now, airlines have sort of put in standards for safety, etc. Airlines like to have about 6,000 feet or above to schedule traffic, etc. Kelowna Kamloops, Kelowna's at about 1,500 feet altitude. So as soon as you go up in altitude, Kelowna, for example, they need a longer runway to be the equivalent of 6,000 feet at sea level. If you go to Calgary, I think it's at 3,300 feet, as I recall. They've got 10,000 foot runways. So that just gives you a very quick snapshot, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next section because I've got some other examples.
Okay, Mark Fortune.
Just to bring a point back to Port McNeill. Port McNeill's runway is 2,400 feet long by 36 feet wide. That's asphalt. They've also got a gravel strip, which is 3,600 feet by 75 feet. And just for Paul River, for comparison, Paul River is 3,600 feet by 150 feet wide. So Port McNeil is not comparable at all with AVRA, and Paul River has its limitations due to its runway length. So not as comparable to AVRA either.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, a couple of questions, if I might.
Shelley, go ahead.
Thank you. One is, I guess I'm curious about the operator models here, the two anomalies with Kamloops and Boundary Bay. What would be sort of the factor, Mark, that would cause or would result in lease agreements as opposed to having the other operator options through the district and city and stuff?
I mean, that's entirely a choice of the city, but you know, in the end, there's money involved, and you'll see that both those airports, for example, Kamloops, they have a landing fee, and through the landing fee and through traffic, they're able to cover their operating and probably most of their capital cost, and it's a choice that the city's made. Rather than hire a manager, they've contracted out the operation of the airport to Vantage Group, and they hire they hire the manager. And you know, there's no question they would take a small bit of the profit. And you know, there's also the commission model, and we've got Mike Hooper sitting in the audience. I mean, the commission is a corporation. They operate very much like the private sector, but so can a district operate like a private sector. Having seen all models of airports, in the end, you still need the community engagement. You need engagement with your tenants to make a successful airport. And Mike, maybe you just wanted to make a quick comment there.
Sure. I'm going to say every time I'm on one of these meetings that I will only say what about Nanaimo Airport, which I can in the public arena, and that way it's on the books. The Nanaimo Airport was owned fee simple by the Nanaimo Airport Commission. So it's a unique model where it's owned fee simple, and the commission does all the leases and in fact does most of the permitting. They're in conversations now with the Regional District of Nanaimo for the highway frontage, and that's a public conversation. But even the information like the architectural guidelines are on site on the website, and they were developed by the airport. So it's almost running like a little municipality.
Thank you. My other quick question was, I shouldn't assume, I guess I'm curious about what the mix of commercial versus passenger traffic is in these different sort of areas, if you looked at that, or if that's a factor at this stage.
No, we actually have section 3. We take a look at a few models from a what we call a regional passenger airport through a general aviation airport to an industrial airport. And maybe we just move that question to right after that particular, taking a look at those 3 options.
For sure. I was just interested whether you had done a comparison along when you're looking at these different airports on that regard, but absolutely can wait for that. Thanks.
Okay, so next on our presentation, we've got the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And this is just one slide, and maybe we'll just pop that up. So I think you'll find if you look at a number of airports, you're actually positioned very well from you know, a perspective of looking at many airports. But anyway, right now you've recently lengthened your runway, and that should read 5,003 feet. You have a major anchor tenant in the form of Coulson, you know, Coulson Air. You've just put in new lights, and you have approaches. And I know that Mark Fortune's just completing an AWAS, which is a air weather station. You've got multiple tenants. You know, just as an example, in Tumbler Ridge, they only have one tenant, and it's a helicopter company. No other tenants. So they're operating the airport primarily as a sort of a medevac and very infrequent charter visits. You also have growth. I know that I think Mark just leased out the sort of the last lot, or last defined lot. You've got opportunities. I think there's a lot of opportunity to market your airport. I doubt that if you walk down a street in Vancouver and asked if anybody had an airport at Alberni Valley, they would say no, partly because there's no scheduled flights. I think there's an opportunity for partnerships. Certainly your local government is committed. It would appear from the outside, at least, that there's a real tourism opportunity. You've got land availability, so you've got opportunities. From a weakness standpoint, you've got the classic obstacle limitation service constraints. You're not on the prairies. Therefore, you do have limited runway expansion area, actually, without a lot of expense, I suggest. You do have a winter weather issue, but that's probably fairly common anywhere in BC. You're not located right next to the city, which is actually an advantage and a disadvantage. It's an advantage because it's very easy for people to fly in, etc. But the disadvantage is you would suffer from noise complaints. I think you have an opportunity where you're far away from the main population area. There's a lack of identity, but I think you're working on addressing that right at the moment. Some of the threats. What if Coulson Air did decide to relocate to the US or something like that? That could be an item. There's always the funding question. And where do you get funds? BC government, is the federal going to fund you? During our survey, there were issues raised with respect to concerns about taxes. The multiple use, you have quite a mix of use of the airport, right from 737s to gliders. That could become an issue if you grew significantly. And you have the standard competition that every airport has in terms of you know, taking business that maybe rightfully belongs to Alberni Valley. So that's just a list. We might we might not have covered it all, and so maybe we'll just open that up to comments, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mark. I'm wondering, actually, one thing from my perspective is is our airport actually referred to as an airport, or does it have some other designation? And if it has another designation, then as an airport, are there limitations to that designation?
No, you are a registered airport. You are in the Canada Flight Supplement. I'll just show you that. Mark Fortune will have one of these. This is a list of all the airports in Canada, and you're in there, registered airport. It shows all the details of your airport for a pilot, shows the length, shows the approaches. So you and because you're a 5,000 foot runway, you're probably what I would call in the top 50 airports in Canada in terms of size.
Perfect. Okay. And if many of the airports I notice are either owned by a city or they're owned by a regional district, but Nanaimo is a commission, is there any advantage to be an airport commission as opposed to coming under the wing of a government of some description?
Yeah, I mean that's a debate which we could have for a long time. Just to give you a few examples, Kelowna is owned and operated by the city. Nanaimo became a commission because it was owned and operated by Transport Canada, and during the devolution of airports in Canada, they were first offered to the province. They were then offered to local governments, i.e. districts or the cities, and then they were offered to commissions. And this generally, like as an example, Pitt Meadows is another airport commission where the municipalities formed a commission to operate the airport, and the land actually moved to the commission. Whereas Boundary Bay, for example, the city of Delta took the airport from the Transport Canada and leased it out to an operator. So there are you know, if you're an airport commission like Mike, he'll say that the airport commission is the best way to run an airport. If you're the airport manager for Kelowna, you'll say city owned is the best way to operate an airport. So you know, the debate can go on for quite a long time. Personally, from my perspective, you know, I worked at Toronto International Airport under Transport Canada. And I've certainly worked with many airport commissions, private airport operators, and city operated airports. And in the end, if you've got a good airport manager, you're going to operate a good airport. So that, and Mike, I don't know whether you want to debate me or support me.
No, I support you, and I think you're right on the money. There's opportunities at each airport, and if we hit the right business model, it shouldn't matter, Mike, if you're under the city or under a commission. The benefit of a commission is there's less layers of approval before you can do a project. It's a thinner veneer on it.
However, I will just argue with that because Mike spends a lot of time working with the two districts and the city to make sure that they're very happy with what he's doing, right? Is that not correct, Mike?
Well, it was when I was there. Now Dave Devaneth, the new CEO, is doing that, but that is a good point. A very good point.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I
Yeah.
noticed was
Again, last meeting, we talked about one of the issues was the lack of long-term leases that we could offer tenants. Is that a weakness?
Yes, that's very good. That's a good point. We should actually have that listed. Um, that probably, you're probably quite correct. We should probably list that as a current weakness. Hopefully it's a solvable weakness.
Agreed.
Okay, thanks. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed was the slide with the catchment. Our catchment is very limited. It's like 26,000. And I'm wondering, like, how is that a weakness? And then if is there analysis that looks at, okay, in the catchment area, how many people are flying on what regular basis? Is there something that we can extrapolate out of that to get a better insight into, where's the future and even just for our local population, since we are an hour and 15 minutes from either place to get on a flight, which is an opportunity maybe for us in the same regard.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, just in the airports that we listed, what starts to emerge is that to have scheduled traffic, to be worthwhile for an airline, they like to have a catchment area of around 100,000. There's all kinds of other factors around that. For example, if you are the Haida Gwaii, and you're an island, obviously somebody's going to want to serve you, even if you've got 26,000 or, even if you got 4,000. But your situation with 26,000 and two competing airports with around 100,000, my personal feeling is that over time, if you take a look at Nova Scotia, over time, one of the airports between Comox, Nanaimo, Campbell River is going to win in terms of getting more traffic. How long that takes is a good question. For Alberni Valley, I think one of the strategic things that we want to achieve is getting a really attractive tourism component so that you start getting charter flights and private business flights, and possibly that will spark a small commuter airline. I wouldn't look for 737s right off though.
No, and then right now we're also, we kind of compete with the float planes coming in and out.
That's correct.
Which are doing, they're doing everybody that wants to fly locally. They're basically, looking after that crowd.
That's correct. And, even Tofino, you've got competition from a Harbor Air flying float planes, for example.
Right.
Okay, Penny had a question and then Pat. Go ahead, Penny.
Thank you. I just missed a bit of that. I had a call. I was wondering about the catchment and how you calculate into that the tourism aspect, because the West Coast has, 1 million visitors, whatever. And I've heard from residents at Sprout Lake that come from other areas and they own homes here or they come to visit on a very regular basis. And they're very interested in the airport.
No, and I think, what's happening since you built your 5,000 foot runway, and Mark Fortune, correct me on this, but you are now getting the odd private jet coming in specifically to go to places in Sprout Lake. I really think in your strategic plan, there's an opportunity to partner with your tourism people to get local sightseeing and possibly charters out of Vancouver directly into a tourism type aspect in Alberni Valley. And Mark, you are getting some new traffic because of your runway, right?
That
Hey,
is
Mark, did
correct.
you want to
We're-
respond?
Yes.
Yep.
Go ahead, Mark
That's-
Fortune.
Yep, that's correct. We are seeing some charter jet traffic coming out of the States more in 2019. Of course, 2020 is being kind of a flat year for everything due to COVID. But we were seeing new arrivals to AVRA that we hadn't seen previous to the runway expansion. That same traffic flow we're getting, say in 2019, out of Southern California into the Tofino market. We get a lot of that on the West Coast, and we were starting to see some of that growth into Alberni before COVID.
Okay, thanks. Penny, you had one more question before we go to Pat?
Just how is that captured in the numbers in the catchment for our area?
Yeah, the catchment is just the population numbers. We don't have the frequency numbers displayed there.
Okay, Pat, you had a question or a comment?
I do. Thanks, Mike. First off, I'm thrilled that we're actually doing this, and we're at this stage in this long conversation about the airport. When we actually went to the taxpayers for approval for the extension of the runway, we made it clear at that time that we were really looking for the airport to, address other opportunities, either with the Colson Group or small private jets or something else, because every year at the BC Economic Development Association conference, I would have a conversation with Pacific Coastal Airlines, and every year they would tell me the same thing. Pat, when your population grows, then we'll take another look at it. But in the meantime, you are too close to Nanaimo and Comox, and it makes way more sense for airlines to serve your population out of those two areas. So I would say that, a continued weakness would be our proximity to other airports and the lack of population. However, so one other weakness or challenge that we have, because there's been lots of conversation about float planes taking up some of the opportunity. But I also know from our conversations, annual conversation with the owner of Sea Air, that the weather, the OLS challenges, in particular with the mountains in between the east and the west side of the island, are a real challenge for float planes. But the one opportunity that we've had discussed on a couple of occasions with flight schools is that we have these 5 or 6 or 7 other airports on the island. And that represents an opportunity when people are getting to various stages in their training. Like initially, they could go to the airports where there's less traffic, and eventually they could move on and go to the airports, Nanaimo, Comox, and Victoria, where there is a lot more traffic and you have to be a more skilled pilot. So again, I'm thrilled with the conversation. great to see Mike Hooper on the call as well. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ron Paulson, go ahead.
Once again, as a new kid on the block, and we seem to spend a lot of time discussing and banting around scheduled service. And I would suspect if there's a market for scheduled service, it would emerge eventually. In particular, somehow connecting flights to Comox and Nanaimo, probably short hops or hauls. But as I sit here, I think about a little tidbit that Wayne Colson imparted to me a number of years ago. And it had to do with what they're actually doing at our airport. And the word he used was niche marketing or a niche business. And I wonder if we would be better, actually use the shotgun approach. I mean, we don't want to rule out anything, but I wonder if we would be, Wayne said, like if I started to build airplanes, Boeing would put me out of business in a month. So he says, what I did is I took a support for that in conversion to water bombers and that sort of thing. I think that our airport, for me anyway, is such a raw jam right now with the ability, and I think one of our strengths in our community and for our airport at this point in time, and I talked about this at the last meeting, is stealing business from other airports, Vancouver, Abbotsford, whoever, is the affordability. And the affordability to live here. And I think the affordability to establish and set up a business, whether you're building a hangar here or something like that. I'm just encouraging us that we maybe use a shotgun approach. I like the idea of niche businesses. I noticed that Warwick is on the line. I think it's his name, Warwick Patterson. I think eventually Warwick may have some comment on kind of the stuff that I'm talking about, niche marketing. I know that Mike Rattan, you've referred to, I think our airport is ideally suited, and this isn't a new idea, but I think it's ideally suited to a forest firefighting school or training center. So I'm talking about maybe using that shotgun effect. We've got some good stuff. Like when I drive out there and see that 5,000 foot runway I'm at, I go, holy cow, talk about an underutilized gem. It is. And maybe, I don't want to rule out scheduled service, but I understand the business model there may not be there, but I think we need some more tenants, if you will. And that comes around to the leases, and we'll talk about that. Boy, oh boy, I went on a long time there, didn't I?
Ron, I think that's an excellent segue. Mike, if we can move to the next section, he's starting to zero in on the vision. And I'd like to just pop through the next three alternatives and move into the vision if we can move to section 3.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm going to talk now about 3 alternative visions. Every airport is obviously a combination of visions, and agreeing with Ron, I think every airport, the more unique you can be, the better you are to define your place in your role and your place in the network. But just to give you 3 big ones, Central Regional Airport Hub. So you could want to be, say, the Kelowna of the island. Kelowna 30 years ago said, we are going to take traffic from Penticton, Vernon, Salmon Arm, and we're going to build to serve that traffic. They started by extending their runway to 7,000 feet. It's now 8,900 feet. They had the catchment area. They were the largest municipality. They designed their approaches. They worked on WestJet. They built their terminal building, and they've become basically the regional hub. Yes, you could aspire to that. You've got a lot of competition to do that. You don't necessarily have the catchment area right off the top. Next one would be, and I chose Salmon Arm again. We would call that sort of a general aviation airport, or a tourism type airport. Salmon Arm is a good example of that. Their runway is 3,000 to 5,000 feet. Generally, the airports of this type of airport have a very strong ownership by aviation enthusiasts. There's generally a flying school. You talked about Warwick Pedersen. He's actually moving out of Squamish to Alberni Valley with the objective of establishing a flight school. And the reason he's doing that is exactly the reasons that Ron mentioned. There's space there. It's got a 5,000-foot runway. Right now, Squamish is limited in the length of their runway. The air traffic's starting to get busy. There's no place to do training. So he's actually got a vision to open up a flight school as a general aviation airport. Next airport. So industrial working airport. This is an interesting airport in Renton, Washington. And you'll notice the length of the runway there, 5,300 feet. It's not much longer than what you have at Alberni Valley. Every 37 that's manufactured there, including the new 737 MAX, they are manufactured at this site, and the first initial flight for a 737 occurs from that runway. Traditionally, they go from that runway over to Boeing Field, where they're then distributed to Asia, etc. Just as a matter of interest, there were 37 37s being produced a month back in 2019. That's obviously stopped now, but this shows you what you can do with an industrial, working type airport. When Andrew saw this, he said, "Mark, that's silly. Boeing's not going to move to Alberni Valley." So he found another airport. Next slide. He found another airport which is on the border of Washington and Idaho, Lewiston Airport. One of the interesting things they did in Lewiston is they actually created an airport business park. And at that business park, they had both aviation locations and non-aviation locations. Because your land was transferred to you from the province, you've got a little bit of, you've got to at least have ancillary aviation uses. But this just gives you an idea, a marketing idea for an airport business park. Next slide. So back to Ron's, and I think there were a few questions about characteristics of the airport roles. So a regional hub, generally you need a catchment area over 100,000. Ideally, you're located close to the city. Probably you have a runway that's over 6,000 feet, and your industry is all airports are mixed, but generally you have a mix of industries on your airport. Tourism, general aviation airport. You actually have, the district actually has what I would call a tourism airport, because Tofino, it's on an island. It's driving time. The catchment area in Tofino is actually quite small. It's, I think, about 4,000 people if you include Ucluelet and Tofino. Ideally, it's located a very close distance to where you're going, 3,000 to 5,000 foot runway, etc. An industrial airport, you require a good working talent. I think having reasonable housing is also a good idea. You should maybe connect with colleges or skills training. Runway ideally above 5,000 feet if you want to be a good industrial airport. And I guess Renton gives you a good example of that. Next slide. Talk about, just to give you some ideas of some airports and what's happened over a period of time. Kelowna Airport has had Kelowna Flightcraft. Kelowna Flightcraft is run by Barry Lapointe. He actually started in Vernon. He moved to Kelowna Airport because he couldn't get a hangar large enough expansion in Vernon. And he now runs KF Aerospace with over 1,000 employees, and that's if you include Hamilton. He does the maintenance for WestJet, probably employs 600 employees around Kelowna. Interestingly, right now you have over 100 employees employed with Coulson, which I think is a major feather in your cap. Abbotsford Airport was a firefighting airport. Conair Aviation started in Abbotsford. They recently have carved out a niche for low-cost carriers. So they've reduced their landing fees, etc., to attract low-cost carriers, and they're very successful in that regard. Prince George Airport, another interesting example. They are on a Great Circle route. They wanted to compete with Alaska as a stop-off point for cargo aircraft. They actually built an 11,000 foot runway with the objective of attracting cargo aircraft, but it's what I call still waiting. They've had only 3 large cargo aircraft land there. It may happen sometime in the future, but there's one where they've made a major investment, but hasn't been uptaken yet. Vanderhoof Airport, we talked about that. Their airshow committee really puts that airshow on the map. Nanaimo Airport, we talked a little bit about that. Their runway extension and terminal expansion has really moved them. They have been the most rapid growing airport, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but you've surpassed Comox in terms of total traffic.
Last year we did, but it's changing now, so we'll see what happens.
Okay. Sandpoint Airport. Now, there's an interesting airport in Idaho. The owner of Quest Aviation decided to build a new aircraft. Sandpoint only has 4,000 people, but they designed and built the Kodiak Airport, which looks a little bit like the Canadian Beaver. That's now been bought by a firm out of France, and they're now selling the Kodiak worldwide, and they're all manufactured in Sandpoint, Idaho. It's a little bit of an equivalent to what you have going on at Alberni Valley with Coulson. Boundary Bay Airport, 2 runways there have been expanded to 5,600 feet with the objective of stealing the traffic out of Vancouver South. Guess what? It hasn't happened yet because the tunnel that goes under the Fraser is a major impediment to growth at the airport. So until that tunnel is fixed, or there's a new bridge, they won't happen. So, you know, that just gives you an idea of some airport examples. Next slide, Andrew. So we now move to the vision discussion. I think we've talked a little bit about constraints and opportunities. I really think you need to leverage the success you've already have. You're already starting to see new traffic because of your 5,000-foot runway. Sense of place. How do you really market Alberni Valley? Like how do you make yourself unique? Obviously, there's a combination of initiatives. You know, most airports have a little bit of everything, but what is your underlying vision? And finally, community ownership. So we move that now to your discussion about vision.
Mike?
Go ahead, Shelley.
Sure. Just a contextual piece. I've been reading a little bit about sort of the projected future of aviation in the industry, and the fact that I think many analysts feel that there won't be a recovery in the aviation industry for at least 3 years plus, and that the aviation industry is having one of the biggest crises of all time given COVID. So to me, that's a really important piece, is to consider what is, as far as we can without a crystal ball, what are some of the drivers that are going to be critical in the future for the aviation industry. And it seems to me, and I don't know lots about this, but passenger traffic is going to be an issue. Domestic is more likely than international from what I've read. And all of these airlines and entities are going to be fighting for a piece of the pie in terms of getting traffic, passenger traffic back to what it was. I've also read a lot about conversion of airlines or the airplanes to cargo because of the dropping value of the planes themselves. So I think we have to really keep in mind that particular backdrop. My view is that we're not going to be able to compete with passenger traffic. With Nanaimo, with Comox, we'll be lucky to have WestJet and Air Canada survive. So to me, that points to some of the other visions, like the industrial vision, the tourism vision, all of those things. But those models themselves too raise questions about what about our pre-existing leases there, and what about the fact that we have, for example, a flight school interested in developing there. Should we not look at some of those factors and build around them?
So what you're saying, Shelley, is that in some ways we may be ideally located to take advantage of what's coming next, since we're not even thinking about passengers.
Yes, well, I guess my point is, when I think of vision, I think that right away, for me anyway, there are some visions, like, for example, the hub vision, that's not really on the table. I mean, I can see a limited hub if we could work with Tofino and hub around, partnerships around tourism and the West Coast, but I don't see us attracting major passenger traffic given the state of the industry and all of that stuff. So I think we have to keep in mind what's the context and what's the potential future that we're operating in. And as I say, from all I've read, I think that we have to take into account some of those factors.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark Duncan, before I turn it over to you, I'd be really interested to hear what Natasha has to say, because I mean, you've been sitting listening intently to all of this, Natasha, and you bring your particular perspective and your background. Fascinated to know what you're thinking.
Right away, I can see all the different scenarios of the regional hub or the tourism. I believe that the tourism could align. I just wanted to know what the numbers were when it comes to which airport that they go to first. If they were doing like connection to the Tofino, like you said, we don't know what the traffic is from like all over the world to Tofino. It's so beautiful. I'm just wondering, do you guys have the stats to how many people actually stop in on the island for that?
Yeah, I'll just do two answers there. One, I think, Mark Fortune, you have approximately 20,000 passengers into Tofino, if I'm correct.
That is correct. 2019, we were over 22,000 with Pacific Coastal, and that was a growing number as they were going to add on routes, but then COVID kicked in and we've plummeted since then.
Yeah, and back to Shelley's comment, one of the interesting things about growth at your airport, to be a little bit crass, the fires, unfortunately, are not going away in California. And, you know, one of your major businesses is Colson Air doing their tanker thing. So you've already got one component that really needs to be built on as much as possible. and I, you know, again, back to your comment on the vision, what are the ancillary businesses that can be built around that? I mean, if you take a look at Renton, and I know that's a massive example, but you can guarantee there's aluminum machine shops, etc., supplying the building there. And I think probably if you trace the supply chain to Colson, they're probably using local people in that regard. So to a certain extent, you're kind of lucky because you're not relying on passenger traffic. Yes, I think there's an opportunity to try to grow that through a tourism standpoint, but you're starting from a base of zero anyway. So anything is positive. I can tell you, Regina Airport is not feeling the same way as you are, right? They're really suffering.
Penny, did you have a comment? Penny?
Thank you. Just a question about climate change. So are we hearing anything coming forward for airport regulations regarding climate change and, you know, a changeover to possible, I heard something a while back about electric planes. Is that something that we should be considering moving forward?
I mean, Harbor Air and actually, Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because Andrew just wrote an article on electric planes. Yes, but it might take a while. Andrew?
Yeah, that's basically the answer. I interviewed the Harbor Air's director of operations, I believe. And the limiting factor there is plane design and R&D. So the planes are very expensive to develop, and there's not very many. So which is why Harbor Air is, I believe, what you probably just heard of was a retrofit they did to an existing plane to add batteries and that sort of thing. And it's an exciting thing. And I think airports like AVRA and all up and down the coast of BC are well positioned to take advantage of electric flight when it becomes more widely available because of the water, essentially, and the geography. So it's a really unique because the electric planes can't go very far. They've got a limited range, so they can't compete over long distances like inland. But over water, they're competing with BC ferries, and that's a lot easier to make the case. Long term, to get ready for that, ground side, there'll need to be battery infrastructure and stuff like that, which will be pretty capital intensive. But again, there's not very many planes in existence that can actually perform that function yet. It's still unknown how long it's going to take for that to really become more widely available, but definitely something to keep an eye on, because it's really exciting, I think.
Thank you. Mike Cooper, did you have a question or comment?
Just a couple of comments real quick. The conversation is really good and powerful. And Port Alberni's always been a hybrid. It's been the water, the mountains, the logging, the First Nations, the tourism. I think it wouldn't be unreasonable for your airport to also be a hybrid, to touch on to aerospace, to touch on to some passenger service for sure, because if people could avoid the hump for the drive, they'd be all over it. And there's things such as cargo that's growing, and down in the States, and Mark almost touched on it too, and maybe you did on that one airport, Mark. They're even having residents on airports where folk that own aircraft will fly right in and put their aircraft in their garage, if you will. So there's a number of opportunities that are unique to tying Port Alberni and Tofino together, because you've got high value tourism and people coming in with a lot of money. So you've got unique opportunities there to grow things like the First Nation tourism and to leverage your both airports together. And that would work well with the scheduled services too.
Okay, thank you. Penny, you to comment, and then Ron.
Yes, thank you. Over the past years, probably about 10 years ago, there was somebody that was actually interested in leasing the airport and providing that kind of service. So that small airport where you could fly into and park your plane, grab your car and stay. There was also the interest in having a like an RV park where they could fly in and they stay actually at the airport in an RV. I don't know that our airport could accommodate that with the restrictions that we have, but it was an interesting proposal. And they referred a lot to American airports, small American airports that said there was every 20 miles there was another airport, and they existed because they offered this type of opportunity for people to actually stay there and close by, inexpensive, different lifestyle. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Penny. And Ron.
Just going back to Mark and Mike talking about the industrial side. It was one of your slides, and I'm just sitting here thinking about the freight side of things. And we have a couple of industries here that have products that are quite time sensitive to get them to market. One is seafood, and maybe Pat Deacon could talk a little bit about the need for timely delivery of the new industry in Port Alberni, which is the development of seaweed is a multi-product thing, but we need to get it out of here. And I'm wondering if there's a niche of transporting that and any other time-sensitive products that may come out of our kind of local area. But I don't know. You guys will know more about lift capacity for an aircraft with regards to freight and what you can and can't get out in volumes from a 5,000-foot runway. But I'm just thinking about seafood. Geez, it'd be neat if we could get seafood out of here and have it into Japan the next day, sort of thing. And same thing with the seaweed industry. And the seaweed industry is going to be a growth industry, and I think it's going to be huge out of the Alberni Valley. Pat, you might have a comment on that.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, a very exciting opportunity there. Effingham Oysters are trying to develop a formula for oysters Rockefeller that could be frozen and delivered to market the next day. So they're quite excited about that. And of course, Cascadia Seaweed is looking to produce a variety of substances from seaweed that would make sense to go into the Asian market, although their initial focus is going to be on the North American market. So both of them have said to me that at some point in the future, they could see themselves flying cargo out of the airport here to their respective marketplaces. The other opportunity that I think does exist is more conversation with Viking Air. They've been using our airport for flight training purposes, although we understand that part of the come on to them is that we're not charging them. So it makes more sense. But they do have facilities in Calgary as well as Victoria. And I do, in the same way, Mark Duncan that you were talking about, Sandpoint, Idaho, and their plane manufacturing. Maybe there's a small niche market here with Viking Air, because I do know that they're looking at a model other than the Otter. So end of comment.
Mark?
Yes. No, I'm just sitting here nodding my head, totally in agreement, because that sort of fits along. In other words, building on your strength. You already have manufacturing. You obviously have skilled people. You have excellent places to live. Mike, you were selling me a waterfront place there earlier. And I know that Mark Fortune, you've already talked to Viking Air. Maybe what we've got to do is do a little bit of digging there and structure a more targeted approach.
They're courting Viking Air to try and establish some infrastructure at the field.
Right. You can see that as a great example too of, a spin-off tenant would be someone like that seaweed guys who are going to outgrow that facility pretty quickly where they're at, with the Port Authority, and the Port Authority might be interested in maybe helping or being part of setting up some, permanent place out near the airport where, everybody could start to use that. Right, Patty?
And maybe some of the product isn't quite so time sensitive, and we'd be able to ship it out of here instead of trucking it out of here. Mark, Duncan, I'm conscious of the time. And
I have one, I was hoping the committee would be very helpful and just establish a vision for us. But I guess Andrew and I are going to have to take all of these away and come back to you with what we think we hear between the lines. I've got two other slides, and it's really to start on the process of your strategic plan. And I'll just whip through those. So you've got them in the back of your mind. So what we've done is we've taken what we learned from the survey and also interviews with your tenants, and we've actually put it in the format of the regional district's strategic focus locations. And Doug, I hope you give us a couple check marks for that. If you take a look at the 5 strategic focuses, one is economy and COVID-19 recovery, and some of the strategies, and maybe you can call those strategies actions, but I really think the current employment at the airport should be celebrated. We've already talked about promoting a flying school. Developing, maybe I understand the lease lots are almost all gone that you have, so maybe there's a question of developing some more. You're about to complete an AWAS improvement. There's probably some more items under this list that we can discuss. Under communications and engagement, the race or the the drag race actually created a connection with the community. That's something that's missing that I think the committee needs to address in our strategic plan. I think you do a pretty good job with your media already, but I think there's could be some more media. I think the advisory committee is very strong, and it's a very good initiative that needs to be continued for the airport. And maybe just the next slide, Andrew. Then if we do the other 3 areas under infrastructure management, we talked a little bit about getting some longer leases. That might trigger a need for a bit of a land use plan. Obviously, as part of our strategic plan, we need to define some capital and servicing. All of those need to be timed with obviously your tenants. Emergency management, I think that's been mentioned a few times in terms of developing a unique airport. Maybe there is a room there to expand the whole forest fire training element and combining that together with Colson. Maybe that can be combined in with your community colleges. Aerial fire, you're basically an aerial firefighting airport. Obviously, the airport's part of the district emergency plan. Again, some of these need to be sort of discussed and expanded. And then under partnerships, mutual benefit, alignment, really successful airports connect with their locality. Just as an example, Vancouver has a very good connection with the Musqueam. Obviously, on your committee, there's a very good connection with your First Nations there. I think that can be strengthened, and maybe there's some opportunities there. Again, partnership with the college, and we've got the chairman of the port sitting on the committee. There's got to be an opportunity for partnership in that regard. So that's a very quick emerging list, and I'll turn it back to you for discussion and find out anything that we've we've missed, or and again, talking a little bit about priorities, which we want to do at our next session.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. There's a couple people we haven't heard a lot from, and I just want to make sure that we've given them opportunity to say something if they want to. Brandy Lauder, I'm not sure if you wanted to add more.
I'm pretty good for now.
Okay, thank you. And Jenny, you've been quietly listening to everything, absorbing it all, but I don't know if you have comments that you want to make.
No, but thank you very much. It is very interesting, and I'm enjoying listening to the conversation and all of the ideas. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mark Duncan, I like the comments that you're making about taking advantage of the opportunities that we do have. And one of the opportunities that you've sort of touched on a bit is to do with support for our anchor tenant, which is Colson's. I think I'm right in saying that they're one of the major users of courier service on Vancouver Island. And, the courier happens to fly into Nanaimo. Does that courier, could it fly into Port Alberni instead of Nanaimo? Not that I want to take away from Mike Hooper's, airport baby or anything, but on the other hand,
he's retired.
He's retired, but yes.
He's working for Alberni now.
Is that something that's even worthwhile considering, or is that the kind of thing that could happen? Because I noticed that you made a comment that Kelowna looked to see what it could take from Penticton and Vernon and other neighboring airports.
No, I think that's a good comment. Just as an example, Cargojet flies into Vancouver, and then they redistribute their cargo into smaller aircraft operated by KF Aerospace, in fact, to fly to places like Kelowna, Nanaimo, and around BC. One of the things we can look at is from a pure cargo standpoint, can we put Alberni Valley on the map, right? I mean, maybe just to be wide open, maybe it's a better distribution center, except for that hump, as we say, but certainly a better distribution center for Tofino and Port Alberni, right? And maybe there is an opportunity for cargo, because if you can get cargo going both ways, in other words, they're bringing the Amazon to Port Alberni and bringing the seaweed back out of Port Alberni, maybe there's a growth opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, Penny.
Thank you. I think we have an opportunity right now that's coming too, because we haven't had a celebration of the expansion of our airport yet. So the local tenants from the airport have had an annual airport day for many years. And I think that we could build on that. I've been to a number of them, and they've had, 100 people or whatever come to visit, and planes coming in from all over the place. So I think that's an opportunity that we need to take advantage of at this time. So mind you, keeping COVID in mind, that large groups aren't really what we want to see at present, but we can plan for something maybe even for next year, where we can invite the community and prospective tenants that we'd like to try and entice to come to our airport. So,
excellent.
Thanks.
Okay. On that note, thanks, Penny. As I said before, I'm very conscious of our time. Bob Cannigy, is your last word to you?
Just wondering if there's an educational opportunity here for a college and working with Colson's perhaps in apprenticeships on aircraft maintenance trades and construction, airframe and instrumentation and those kind of initiatives?
Maybe a possibility, certainly worthwhile.
No,
Opening
and
discussion.
there's a very good example of that with Kelowna Flight Craft, who worked with the Okanagan and UBC to actually put in place a training facility for aircraft technicians. And in actual fact, KF Aerospace is building a center at Kelowna Airport, which is basically to be an innovation center for aviation. Again, they've decided to give back to the community because it also benefits them. So maybe there's an opportunity to have exactly as what Bob says.
And I know one of the issues that Colson's is experiencing right now is finding qualified people to do the painting that they need to have done on all their aircraft. And so much of the painting ends up being done outside of the Alberni Valley because they simply don't have enough people here who are qualified to do that. And they would be happy to be involved in training. I know that from talking to Wayne. So maybe it's a possibility. Okay, I'm going to bring this to a close because of the time. Mark and Andrew, thank you so much for your time with us today, and everybody in the committee, thank you so much for your time. Could we have a motion to receive the reports, the 4 reports that we had from our consultants, please?
Bob, can I get your so
Pat, and then Ron, thank you. Anybody opposed to that motion? Then I declare that it's been carried. There is no unfinished business. Just a little bit of late business. Are there any questions or comments from the public that we haven't heard yet? Janice?
There are no questions from the public, but Warwick Patterson did attend the meeting but has left. And he just made a comment that he applauds the proactive efforts that everybody's doing on the committee. And he looks forward to spending some time to present some of the ideas he has for the airport.
Okay, thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
And a motion to adjourn, please. Okay, thanks, Shelley. And second, Ron, thank you so much. Okay, everybody. So thank you very much. Our next session, I think, is the 23rd of February.
1 week from today.
A week from today. Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'm really excited. Really looking forward to seeing where we've gone. This is something we've been working towards for a long time. So thank you, everybody, for your time and your efforts. And Janice, thank you for looking after things. Okay, thank you.
April,
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.